Okay, so starting with the rule updates, the first one is the minimum site visit requirements by validation verification body. This was released last month by Gold Standard. So to give you a bit of context, to help you understand these requirements in a better way, I would like to take you back through the earlier requirements which we had on site visit and the site visit frequency. Meaning, the requirements which were laid down in Gold Standard version 2.2. So Gold Standard version 2.2 required project developers to follow a specific frequency for their site visits. And the first site visit is required to take place in the first 2 years after the start date of the crediting period. And then any follow-up site visits have to take place at least once every 3 years after this 2-year period. And for all large-scale projects, a site visit by DOE was required for every verification. So irrespective of how many verifications you are going through in a crediting cycle, for every verification, a site visit is mandatory in case of large-scale projects. However, in case of small-scale projects, verification site visits other than these two mandatory site visits may be exempted if appropriate, justification is provided that a site visit for those specific verifications is not required. Of course, this would depend on the type of project and also how recently was the last site visit done, the monitoring plan, how many parameters are there in a monitoring plan, how easier it is to verify the parameters of the monitoring plan, etc. So depending on all these factors, there was a possibility that for small scale projects, VVBs can ask for an exception to not go on site other than the mandatory ones. But these two were the mandatory ones. So first visit has to be done in first 2 years, and the second visit, or what we call as a follow-up site visit, has to be done every 3 years. So this is slightly differently drafted in the Gold Standard for the global goals, principles and requirements, because the crediting cycle now changes from a previous 7-year cycle to a 5-year cycle. So if you look at the requirements will only talk about the requirements will only talk about only one performance verification, at least one performance verification, which has to take place in a 5-year crediting cycle. And this performance certification has to be done no later than 2 years after project implementation or design certification date, whichever is later. Now, the reason why the GS4GG principles and requirements doesn't talk about a follow-up site visit is the fact that, as I mentioned a minute back, now the crediting cycle is 5 years. So once this first site visit is done, or once this first performance certification is done, then it will be time for the project to apply for renewal. And then a site visit at the time of crediting period renewal, again, it has been made mandatory in the GS4GG requirements. So that ways, it is always ensured in a way that that the first site visit takes place in the first 2 years, and then there is always a site visit taking place for crediting period renewal after 3 years of this visit. But for the transitioning projects, this is slightly different. So when I say transitioning projects, I mean projects which have, come over, who has, shifted to Gold Standard for the global goals from the previous standard versions, like version 1 projects or 2 projects, 2.2 projects. So those are all, transitioning projects. So for transitioning projects, the requirement, is slightly different from the GS4GG requirements. And transitioning projects basically follow the same requirement as we saw in the previous slides. So this slide. So any transitioning project which is moving from any other gold standard version to GS4GG follows these requirements. And the reason for that is the fact that these transitioning projects still maintain a 7-year cycle. So therefore there are two mandatory site visits. So one is in the first 2 years, and the follow-up is at least once every 3 years after this first site visit. So hopefully this should give you some context to understand this rule update. Now this rule update requires only in cases where there is a non-compliance to the minimum site visit requirements. So what are the minimum site visit requirements? So the requirements which we saw in the previous 2 slides are the minimum site visit requirements. So whenever there is a non-compliance, whenever you are not able to carry out these site visits, these minimum prescribed site visits at these frequencies, then it is a non-compliance. Another key point to note here is that this rule update applies to non-compliance cases which are undergoing verification, meaning there is already a VVB which is in the process of verifying a project. So a project is still under verification stage. And then this applies to, all standalone projects, all POAs, CPA, VPAs, all scale projects, from micro scale, small scale to large scale, all activity types, and also projects which are very old, like version 1 projects. So this is now the overarching requirement on how to deal with non-compliances related to minimum site visit requirements. The interesting bit here is that depending on whether depending on the reasons for the delay in the site visit, and depending on the specific requirements which have been laid down for different scenarios, the VVB now has the sort of authority to approve a non-compliance. But yes, as I said, this would depend on the various scenarios that we'll just discuss, and what are the main reasons for a non-compliance, or what were the main reasons why a project was not able to do a site visit on time. So the reason why we are covering this information is because this will greatly impact on whether a VVB can themselves approve such a non-compliance, or does this has to be addressed by gold standard or sustain cert. So there are 2 types of categories under which the reasons for not carrying out site visit on time has been categorized: force majeure and non-force majeure. So force majeure, I'm sure you all must be aware, is something which is beyond your control and is not your fault, and a situation which is not arising because of your negligence, and is something which is unforeseeable. You cannot predict, or you cannot anticipate that such an event can happen. So any act of war, a natural disaster, any change in governmental requirements are all considered as force majeure reasons. And anything which is non-force majeure is something which is to some extent in your control. Something like shortage of personnel, or if there are any issues related to liquidity or solvency problems, any problems related to contracts with subcontractors, or unavailability of personnel. So these are not considered as force majeure. So let's see what are the main scenarios which could arise, and how and what would be, you know, the role of a VVB in such cases. So let's take, you know, the first site visit case first. So let's say if a VVB, you know, who is conducting, you know, site visit, the first performance certification site visit realizes that, you know, the first site visit was not done in the first 2 years. Now, what happens? Now, there are a couple of, you know, scenarios under first site visit. The first one is the start date of the crediting period is after the project registration date. So if this is the situation, then the VVB, you know, shall review paragraph 3.1.3 of design change requirements. So I have, you know, included this 3.1.3b requirement in the tabular form in the slide, which basically, you know, will guide the VVB on what to do. Now, you may think that, you know, changing the crediting period start date sort of doesn't align well with, you know, site visit requirement. Well, the reason is that, you know, if by changing the start date of a crediting period, the 2-year window can be extended, then possibly the project will not be in a non-compliance situation. So essentially, when we are, you know, changing the start date of the crediting period, it gives you a longer time, or if it extends, you know, this 2-year time frame within which the first site visit has to be done, and hopefully this delayed verification site visit will fall now under this extended, you know, 2-year. Well, extended is also not the right word, but this, you know, this 2-year time frame, which has now shifted from the earlier 2-year time frame. So if you know, the crediting period start date is, let's say, updated by 1 year compared to what is mentioned in the registered PDD, then there is no justification or approval required to be taken from GS or SustainCert, or no justification is required to be provided by PDD, by the project developer, or by the VVB. However, if the site visit is required to be you know, fixed in such a way that the crediting period has to be updated by more than 1 year, but up to 2 years, then, you know, it is the VVB's responsibility to make sure that at the time of verification, they assess that there are no changes that have occurred in the project activity because of this change in the crediting period. But if there are any changes, then, you know, the baseline should be updated, or you know, a more conservative approach should be followed for verification. So this was for first site visit case, wherein the start date of crediting period is after project registration date. Now, what happens if the start date of crediting period is before the project registration date? So depending on the reason of the delay, the VVB, you know, will have to then follow different pathways. If the reason was something which was beyond the control of project developers, then, you know, the start date may be postponed for maximum up to 2 years. But there has to be an assessment by the VVB that no changes to the baseline have occurred because of this change in the crediting period. If the reason was, you know, non-force majeure, then no deviation is allowed. As a result of which the VVB shall not verify the period which is falling under the ineligible period. So let's say there is a 3-year monitoring period, and the site visit, you know, should have been done after 2 years. So essentially, there is a 1-year period which is ineligible. So that 1-year period, you know, will not be verified by the VVB. And the same logic, you know, applies to gold standard CER projects also. So now that, many projects, many gold standard CDM projects are transitioning to GS for GG. So this is something, which has to be kept in mind. And it should be ensured that when we say site visit, it means a gold standard site visit. Because sometimes, we come across cases wherein there were, site visits which were happening, but only for CDM, not for gold standard. But yes, would like to clarify that these requirements, apply for gold standard site visits as well. We also received, a few questions related to, how will COVID-19 fit into these updates? Well, see, COVID-19, has been dealt with separately under the COVID-19 interim measures document. So if there is a delay in site visit because of COVID-19, then the COVID-19 interim measures would apply in those cases. All right, so let's see, what happens with follow-up site visit. So follow-up site visits are the site visits which have to take place within the next 3 years after the first site visit. If the reason was something which was beyond the control of a project developer, then it is the VVB who has to submit a request for deviation to the gold standard. But if the reason was non-force majeure, then the VVB, as we saw in the earlier slide, will not verify the monitoring period, which is outside of this 3-year period from the site visit date. And the same thing applies for gold standard CER projects as well. So yes, then it becomes important for the VVB to ensure that their opinion and their assessment is now properly included in the monitoring and verification reports. Also, there is a possibility that there might be gap between the eligible monitoring periods because you can only claim for, let's say, 3 years prior to the follow-up site visit, and for the first verification you already claimed like 2 years. So there might be some gap between this 2-year and a 3-year time frame. So if there is any gap, then again the VVB has to make sure that there is continuity in the monitoring of the parameters, and there were no changes in this gap period. All right, so that was the minimum site visit requirements. Moving on to the next one, which is on public disclosure requirements. Okay, so this one, as I said in one of the earlier slides, is a rule clarification. It's not a rule update. It's not a new rule. It's something which has already been there in the gold standard for the global goals, principles and requirements document. But this is more like a clarification which has been released by gold standard to clarify what all documents will be made publicly available on the Sustained SAP application, and thereon on the gold standard impact registry as well. And what are the various ways to treat the confidential information. So information or documentation related to stakeholder consultation, safeguarding assessment, and of course the project design documents or VPADDs, monitoring reports, emission reduction, calculation files, financial analysis spreadsheets, especially the ones where just the additionality is justified, applying financial additionality, validation verification reports, including the reports for micro scale internal validations and internal verifications, which are audited by sustained cert, are all going to be, are required to be made publicly available. In addition to this, any other relevant project document or information which we feel is necessary to ensure the transparency of how that project has been assessed for those, let's say, specific safeguarding principles or additionality or baseline, are also required to be made public. So things like EIA reports, which are required, for some of the renewable energy projects, or expert reports like objective observer reports for micro scale projects. So all these, are some of the important documents that are to be made public. Of course, this is not the complete list. Depending on the project situation, project type, there might be some more additional information or documentation which would be required to make public. However, we understand that all these documents also contain some sensitive information which is on a commercial level or on a personal security point of view sensitive and is proprietary in nature. So that information we will be not disclosed and will be kept as private. So things like end users details. So we have sometimes documents which have a list of all the end users, their contact details, their addresses, etc. So all that kind of information will not be disclosed to public. Also information which is related to investment, or let's say financials of a project, will also be considered as commercially sensitive and will not be disclosed to public. But at the same time, information which was, for example, used to demonstrate a project additionality, or information which was used to support support the demonstration of sustainable development impacts, or information which was used as part of the safeguarding principles assessment. So all this is an important information, and it will not be deemed confidential and will be made publicly available. Also, even though it doesn't clearly say that all the other Excel files also are to be made publicly available, so would like to clarify that any information, any data, any value which has been used, any form in the electronic spreadsheets which were used for, let's say, emission reduction calculations or calculation of IRR of a project. So all those are not deemed additional and will be made public. In case there is confidential information. So when I say confidential information, so confidential information would be information like this, like end users details or investment or finance related information. So any such confidential information can be redacted in the files and can be made available separately, so that only the redacted version is publicly available. So what project developers can do is that they can prepare two versions of the documents. Let's say two versions of a PDD. So the first version would be, let's say, the original version, which has all the information which is required by gold standard, by VVBs, and also by sustained cert to review a project. So that version will be treated confidentially and will be kept private. It will not be disclosed to public. Another version can be prepared to redact, some of this confidential information. For example, you can black out certain portions of the documents, or for the Excel files, if there is any formula, or any information which is, again, commercially or financially sensitive, then that Excel file can be converted to a PDF, or can also be protected so that no changes can be made, or no background algorithms can be seen in the Excel file, and those can then be made publicly available. So there are ways through which the confidential information can be redacted, or can be made available in a way through which the background workings or the background algorithms can be made visible. Also, if there are any specific host country legislations on data sharing policy for any specific information, that can be shared by the project developer, and then that specific information will be treated as confidential. And as I mentioned before, this is a rule clarification. It's not a new rule. It's not a rule update. It's a clarification to the existing rule which has been released, meaning that it applies to all project activities. So therefore, we will now be making sure that these guidelines are being applied for all projects consistently and uniformly going forward.
Neka, if I may add something, just a small clarification on the clarification. When you talk about this, the confidential public version of the documents, so as you see in the previous slide, all the formulas that are there for demonstrating the emission reduction calculations or additionality have to be available. So what you can do to remove confidential information is, for example, to remove the names and phone numbers of the users of the cook stoves, or any other specific information, but it needs to be pretty clear how you have, and replicable how you have made the calculations from the files that are provided on the gold standard registry. I hope that that explains it and makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Martha. Yeah. So we'll take more questions if you have. I'm sure you'll have more questions on this. So yeah, happy to clarify any further questions you might have. Okay, so moving on to our next update, which again is not a very new update. So it's related to eligibility of gold standard VERs under CORSIA regime. But since there is some work which is going on the gold standard impact registry, and many project developers are also very keen to understand how their projects will be marked as, how their projects, or how the gold standard VERs issued from their projects will be marked as CORSIA eligible or not. So we thought we could do a quick update on where this eligibility of gold standard VERs stands. So you all must be aware that the main requirement from CORSIA revolves around additionality. So CORSIA requires all the eligible offset programs, all the eligible carbon offset programs, and gold standard is one of the eligible carbon offset programs under CORSIA, should have processes around additionality. So meaning gold standard. So meaning that, all the emission reductions which are taking place, are additional in nature, which suggests that, those emission reductions are happening beyond what is required by law, what is beyond what is required, by regulation, or beyond what is, a legally binding mandate in that specific host country, and that, exceeds, that would not have occurred in a normal, business as usual scenario. So this is, the main, eligibility criteria around which, the CORSIA requirements revolve around. However, there are, certain exceptions when we talk about, additionality. So we just discussed that, a project or emission reductions are additional if they are happening beyond what is required by law or beyond what is required by regulation. So keeping that point in mind, it's very interesting to see that there are also some methodologies which, allows for exemptions where, this legally binding mandate or law or regulation is not, systematically enforced, meaning that, this type of a non-compliance is pretty common and is, widespread across that host country. So this is like an exemption, because on one hand, you are saying that, okay, your project should be additional, but on the other hand, there might be a case wherein your project is making use of a methodology which allows exemptions for situations wherein, the law or regulation is not systematically enforced. I think one such classic case is ACM 00022, wherein, any situations wherein the compliance rate, of laws and regulations below 50%, is also allowed for in case you want to claim, emission reductions. So this is, one example, and there are a few other methodologies, which work on a similar approach, like AMS 3K, 3Z, or AM, 83. So just wanted to, highlight this point out, because even though there are not many common projects that we receive on these methodologies, but yes, if there are, any gold standard methodologies, if there are any gold standard projects using these methodologies, wherein the project is not able to, or wherein the technology is not, enforced, or the legally binding mandates are not enforced in a systematic manner, but they are still, considered as additional and will be eligible under CORSIA. And the other, important bit apart from additionality are the vintages. So I think all the, eligible registered projects, POAs, VPAs, are eligible as long as, they have a crediting period start date from 1st January 2016, but before, 1st January 2021. Meaning that a project, of course, may have a longer crediting cycle than this duration. So a project, will still be eligible under CORSIA, but only if, the vintages are 2016 to December, 2020. That project can go ahead and claim gold standard BERs beyond 2020 as well as gold standard BERs, but then those gold standard BERs will not be CORSIA eligible. So there is, quite a bit of, registry update work that we are doing, both sustained cert and gold standard, to make sure that we are easily able to distinguish between CORSIA eligible and CORSIA ineligible gold standard VERs. So essentially, moving forward, all gold standard VERs which are issued for the vintage 1st Jan 2021 onwards are going to be marked as not as CORSIA not eligible on the gold standard impact registry. And of course, this is something which is also going to be recorded in the monitoring and verification reports. So this is another point which the VVDs have to take care of in their verification reports, and also sustain cert, wherein sustain cert is playing the role of an auditor or for a VVD, for instance, for micro scale projects. Then it is mandatory to have this information clearly and transparently disclosed in the monitoring and verification reports. So those were some of the recent updates and clarifications. Just wanted to go over some other important rules and requirements which are already there in the gold standard principles, gold standard for the global goals principles and requirements document, but is something which is not enforced in a consistent and systematic manner. So we thought it's a great opportunity to make all the project developers aware about this requirement and educate them more on what they are required to do as part of this requirement. So if you have seen the principles and requirements document, so section 5D of that document talks about a requirement on annual reporting, which all gold standard for global goal projects have to comply with. And it also applies to projects which have transitioned from previous gold standard version to gold standard for the global goals. So what does this mean? So annual reporting is like a check-in which we would like to make with project developers to see if everything is going fine, what's happening with the project, is the project going as per the plan, if there are any changes in the project, if there are any grievances that the project has received. So it's more like a check-in, but a very important check-in because it's part of the requirements. So what does the requirement say? So the requirements say that for each monitoring year, the project developers are required to submit an annual report by the end of next calendar year, for which verification is not completed. So let's take the example of a project, project ABC. So this project, let's say is undergoing, verification in 2019 or was going on, verification or started verification in 2019. So as part of the requirements, an annual report is required to be submitted by the end of next calendar year, meaning by the end of 2020, an annual report, should be submitted. Also, if the verification is in progress, but let's say not completed because of some reason, then an annual report is still required by the end of the calendar year. Another important bit, which I wanted to highlight here is that annual report or review of annual reports is not a certification decision. So we are not going to, hold up on any ongoing verification, let's say, because of something, because of some cards or because of some gaps which we found in the annual reports. So annual reports is not a certification decision, but the information from the annual reports is used as a tool to understand what is going to be, what we can expect when we will review the verification report for this project. Also, when I say that the annual reports have to be submitted, it means that they have to be uploaded on the Sustain Cert application, after which they will be made publicly available. So what does this annual report needs to include? So there is already a fixed available template for preparing annual reports. But to give you a very high level overview of what needs to go in the annual report. So it's basically a summary of all the recent activities or any actions, important actions that a project developer has taken for any given project. If there were any feedback or inputs which were provided by the stakeholders during that period, those should go into the annual reports. Anything related to grievances, of course, should be a part of the annual reports. If there are any updates in terms of monitoring plan, that can be included in the annual report itself. So basically, it's just, as I said before, it's just like a check-in to see how things are going, and if there are any changes, if there are any major issues that we should anticipate when we will start the performance certification for that project activity. But yes, this is something which we will probably not review in detail and send you a feedback form on. So there are no feedback forms that you will receive after submission of annual reports. It's just a milestone that a project developer has to complete as part of the requirements. I know that many of you now must be thinking that, oh, but we have never ever submitted an annual report yet, so what should we do? So we would say that if you have never submitted an annual report, just go ahead and do whenever it is due next, or just go ahead and submit one if it is due now, as soon as possible. And then make sure that this is done on time moving forward. Okay, the other one is on gold standard validation completion time frame. This is again a very important requirement that we wanted to share with you all. So this requirement says that all projects should complete validation within 2 years of listing of the project. So this also is something on which we have received quite a lot of questions and clarifications, asking that no, but my project was not a GS4GG project. My project transitioned from some other version, gold standard version, to GS4GG. Then will this still apply? So the short answer is this requirement applies to all scale projects, to all project types, to all project streams, meaning both gold standard BER and gold standard CDM projects have to comply with this requirement. And even if your project is not a GS4GG project, this requirement will still apply. And even if it is a micro scale project, then also this requirement will apply. And when we say completion of validation, we mean that completion of validation is actually the date of submission of validation report by the VVB. So it's the date when the VVB finally sort of signs off the final validation report, the final version of the validation report. Also, in case of micro scale projects, this would be the completion of internal validation by Sustain Cert. There might be still a lag in between when the validation is completed and when the design review of the project starts. But here the reference is only on the completion of validation process for microscale projects or completion of validation report, the final version of validation report by the VVD. Okay, another update which we wanted to give you was on the list of deviations that are now available on Gold Standard website. This was something which we pretty quickly discussed in the last webinar, and we said that this is something which Gold Standard is working on. But now this list is pretty much up to date and is updated on a very regular basis. So you should now be able to see all the information related to recent deviations that have been both approved or rejected by Gold Standard. So any project level deviations which were specific to that project or which were specific to a review that the project underwent, for example, a non-compliance which was seen as part of performance certification for that specific monitoring period for that specific project. So that basically goes on the project page in the Sustain Cert application. But if the deviation is something which applies to all the other projects as well, which sort of sets a precedent. So a deviation which is on a broader methodological requirement, and many projects are not able to, let's say, follow that requirement. So that type of a deviation will be made available on the Gold Standard website. So I think I can quickly share with you where you can find this deviation list and then how does it look. Okay, I hope you can see my screen. So this is the Gold Standard website. So if you go to this section on standards, you should be able to see a tab called deviations. So if you go to the deviations section, you should be able to see a list of all the deviations. When I say all the deviations since last year, which have been processed by Gold Standard. If you are interested to know specifically deviations which were done on design changes or on methodologies or any specific Gold Standard rules or requirements, those also can be found, because there are separate sections for these three types of deviations on the website page. So this is a list. So it basically gives out the title of the project and whether it applies to any other projects or not, whether this deviation applies to other projects or not. So you should be able to see, for example, the deviation given to this specific project applies to all Standard projects. So for more details, you can you can see the deviation form and find out what were the deviations and under what conditions the deviation was granted. So this is something which Sustain Cert is also using now pretty systematically whenever we receive any deviation request from project developers. So depending on if a similar type of a deviation has been approved or rejected in the past, so the newly received deviation requests are also processed accordingly. Of course, this is something which we use only as a preliminary level to check whether there are any previously given deviations like this in the past or not. But yes, this is something which we have been using and which we are also directing project developers to go and check to help them, write their deviation forms accordingly. So yeah, this is now up and live, which was not the case when we did the webinar last time. All right. So then moving on to the next bit. So I just, wanted to quickly take you all through the transition requirements. And as I mentioned before, we have already done, this a couple of times. But since we are still receiving a lot of queries on transition requirements, so we'll do a quick run through of the key points. So the most important thing, that should be kept in mind is the fact that standalone projects, I think is still, pretty straightforward when we talk about, transition, because it's just one project and it's easier to transition that one project from gold standard, from CDM to gold standard for the global goals, or from any other, standard to gold standard for the global goals. But I think the point where it becomes tricky is when, we are talking about transitioning of POAs or transitioning of CPAs. Now gold standard allows both, meaning that the POAs can also be transitioned, and individual CPAs from those, POAs can also be transitioned to gold standard as standalone projects. However, please note that at the moment we have not, received a real, case wherein CPAs are being transitioned from CDM to GS4GG as standalone projects. So that's something which we have not received so far. And that's why we don't have a, very clearly marked out process on how that should be dealt with. But please remember that transition can happen, at both the levels. But when we're talking about transition of POAs, then the POA has to, transition. So we cannot have a situation wherein only, some of the CPAs transition, and the POA, which is in gold standard for the global goals, is very different from the POA which is there in CDM. So at that, for POA transition, the whole POA has to transition. But yes, if all the CPAs are not ready to transition, that's fine. But transition, only takes place at POA levels, from CDM to GS4GG. And this, is eligible only in cases wherein, the projects or the CPAs have a crediting period start date after 1st January 2016. Now, projects which have a crediting period start date before 1st January 2016 are also eligible, but they have to demonstrate at the time of preliminary review that project faces, serious risk of discontinuation if carbon revenues are not received by the project. And they also have to sort of justify that how, the project has been operational in the absence of carbon revenues, all these years. So the other bit, just wanted to highlight was the process, the process, of transitioning. So even though we call this process as transition from CDM to GS4GG, but the review that these projects have to go through is a preliminary review. So don't get confused between a transition review and a preliminary review. In this case, even though we are calling the process as a transition process, but the review which that project has to go through is a preliminary review. So I thought of just highlighting this because we have received many requests for transition reviews on the sustained cert application for projects which are moving from CDM to GS for GG. So please note that for those projects, you should book a preliminary review and not a transition review. So transition review is on the sustained cert application for projects which are transitioning from earlier gold standard versions to gold standard for the global goals. But since you are transitioning from CDM, so your first step would still be a preliminary review. Also, the another important point to keep in mind are the renewable energy eligibility requirements. So please note that on top of these transition requirements, specific project activity type requirements also apply. So if you are looking to transition a project, a wind project from CDM to GS for GG, then you have to make sure that the project also complies with the gold standard renewable energy activity requirements. So requirements on whether the project is located in a low middle income country or a higher middle income country, or whether the penetration rate of that specific technology is 5% or not. So all these requirements also will apply on top of these transition requirements. So deregistration from the other standard is also a very commonly asked question. So the short answer is for CDM projects, it's for CDM energy and waste projects, it's not required. For CDM AR projects, it is required. And for projects which are transitioning from other schemes, like projects transitioning from VCS to GS, for that also deregistration is required. On financial additionality, all the eligible CDM JI projects are not required to carry out any additional assessment. So when I say eligible, it automatically means that only the registered projects are eligible. So if a project has been registered or accepted by CDM, then it automatically means that its additionality assessment will be accepted by gold standard as well. So there is no additional additionality assessment which registered CDM projects have to demonstrate. But yes, once transition, these projects have to demonstrate ongoing financial need, but that too at the time of crediting period renewal under gold standard for the global goals. In terms of methodology and tool version, specific flexibilities have been provided by gold standard. For instance, in case of for instance, when a project is submitting for preliminary review for transitioning, then the same version with which that project was registered with CDM can be used. So it's not mandatory to update the version of the methodology or the tool with which they were registered with CDM. Of course, project developers can do voluntarily, but it's not mandatory. However, whenever that project or CPA, VPA is coming to the crediting period renewal after becoming a gold standard for global goals, then they have to update the methodology and the tool version, which is available, the most recent version available at the time when let's say they start the crediting period renewal. A bit of a important point here is that by now you all must have seen those 3 certification pathways which are discussed in the transition request form. Please note that if you are transitioning with the same methodology or tool version, then the option number 2 of that certification pathway is not applicable. So option number 2 basically, says that the preliminary review, validation, and design certification is all combined and is, done by SustainCert. So that option can be used only if the same version of methodology and tool with which the project or activity was registered with CDM is being applied. If there is any change in methodology version or tool which is made by a project developer, then option number 2 of the certification pathway cannot be used. Again, a few basic things to keep in mind. The scale of a project cannot change after transitioning. The scale with which the project was registered has to be maintained for transition as well. In terms of crediting period, the project has to switch to the GS4GG crediting cycle, meaning a 5-year crediting cycle. So the crediting cycle, either could be renewable, which is like for which you can claim a total of 15 years, or fixed, for which emission reductions can be claimed for 10 years. But this is the total maximum duration for which the emission reductions can be claimed. And this 10-year or a 15-year period includes the period for which CERs have already been claimed under CDM. So that's an important bit. So if a project has been claiming emission reductions since 2018, for example, so the 15-year cycle will actually start from 2018. So all these years in which emission reductions or CERs have been claimed under CDM are also part of this entire GS4GG crediting cycle. So these are a couple of examples to help you understand how the crediting cycle would work once a CDM project transitions to GS4GG. Let's say we have a project which was registered with a renewable crediting period under CDM, meaning it has a 21-year crediting period. And its crediting period starts from 2018, 1st Jan 2018. So as I mentioned before, the 15-year cycle would then start from the date from which the CERs were issued or were claimed under CDM. So this 15-year cycle would basically start from 2018 itself, 15-year period. And since it is now a 5-year cycle, so the crediting period now has to be renewed after 5 years, starting from 2018, meaning that the second crediting period for this project, if it transitions to GS4GG, will start in December 2022. And then the third crediting period in 2027. Let's take the example of a fixed crediting period. Now this is a slight different approach. When we say fixed, so in CDM we never renew a crediting period, right? But since the crediting cycles are of only 5 years under Gold Standard for the Global Goals, so a crediting period still has to be renewed after 5 years, even if it is a fixed crediting period under CDM. And also the crediting period type cannot be changed. So if a project had a fixed crediting period under CDM, it has to follow the same under Gold Standard for the Global Goals as well. It cannot shift to a 7x3 crediting cycle. Transition request form is another important document which has to be submitted along with the Gold Standard PDD for the preliminary review of projects transitioning. If it is a pure CDM project, then all the sections of the transition request form have to be filled up by the project developer. However, if it is an already gold standard CDN project, switching to gold standard BER stream under GS4GG, then the section 3 of the transition request form can be basically skipped. Again, I would highly recommend you all to go through this transition request form, because this transition request form is a very helpful document. It gives you a lot of guidance on how and when the requirements apply. For instance, when I was speaking about the 3 certification pathways from which project developers can choose from to transition their projects. So the transition request form will actually give you the detailed requirements on when specific options are applicable. So under which conditions, which options can be applied and which options doesn't apply under what conditions. So please have a look at this this transition request form. Also, there are a lot of resources which have been developed to help you navigate through the transition requirements. So both gold standard and sustain cert have landing pages on transition requirements. So here I'm showing you, for example, the sustain cert page on CDN transition. So information on CDN transition is available under the resources tab on sustain cert website. So this would give you a very detailed overview on the basic requirements, a very useful flowchart which you can use to screen the eligibility of projects, and then it also talks about the renewable energy eligibility requirements, which I just mentioned a few minutes back. And all the basically key points that you need to keep in mind for transitioning projects. And these are the 3 certification pathways, 3 options from which project developers can choose and apply. But all these 3 options have certain conditions only under which these would apply. So all this is detailed out in the transition request form as well. So please have a look at it. It's a very useful resource that we all can make use of. So going back to our presentation, so those were some of the basic key points that I wanted to share with you all on CDN transition. I think we have already run over time, so I'll quickly give you a refresher on the new safe water supply methodology. Not the safe water supply methodology, but what happens to projects which are using the TPDD tech methodology once the safe water supply methodology has been released. So the new methodology called the Safe Drinking Water Supply Methodology version 1 was released in May this year. So it basically means that the Annex 3 of the TPDD tech methodology, which was being applied for all safe water supply projects, is not valid anymore. So it means that as soon as this methodology was released, this Annex 3 became invalid, and no new projects can use this Annex 3. So when I say no new projects, it means no preliminary reviews can be submitted based on Annex 3 of the TPDD tech methodology. However, projects which were already submitted for preliminary review before the release of the methodology had a grace period till 2nd of August to complete the design review to submit for design review, sorry, to make use of the Annex 3 of TPDD Tech methodology. In case you didn't had a chance to see this, and in case you are still under validation using the Annex 3 of TPDD Tech methodology, please note that those submissions will not be accepted anymore, and you have to update the methodology of the project, and you have to provide an updated VVB opinion based on the new safe water supply methodology. In case there are issuances, so I think for issuances, we are all pretty well aware that there are caps which have been put in place. For example, for woody biomass, for charcoal, there are all caps that have been put in place, and the same applies for all issuances under Annex 3 of TPDD Tech methodology. However, there is also an option to do a field test if some of the project developers want to go that route and don't want to use the default value. So you can go ahead and do a field test also. But please note that in case of a field test also, the values are sort of capped at 0.5 kg per liter for woody biomass and 0.125 kg per liter for charcoal. So this is the maximum that can be accepted even after doing a field test. For crediting period renewals, all the projects which were previously registered under Annex 3 of TPDD Tech methodology now have to make use of the new safe drinking water supply methodology for crediting period renewal. So you have to redo, your PDD, of course, and also redo, your estimations, monitoring plan, etc., in line with this new methodology. Design changes, are also not allowed under the Annex 3 of TPDD Tech methodology anymore. So if there are any changes that you would like to make to, let's say, the registered project boundary, you want to include new units, or you want to expand the boundary to include other countries. So all that is not possible under Annex 3 of the TPDD Tech methodology anymore. So for any design changes, you have to upgrade to the new safe water supply methodology. There is also, a very useful guide on the Gold Standard website. So they have a FAQ page under resources section on Gold Standard website. So you should be able to, find some pretty valuable information in terms of, this new methodology. So if you have, questions related to let's say, the key criteria and the various, additional requirements or new requirements, which are now required to be complied with for this methodology, you can visit this FAQ page on the Gold Standard website. All right, so I think that's it, from our side. I hope it was a very useful session for you, and I hope you found this information useful. So I think there is enough of talking from our side. So maybe we'll open the floor for questions for a few minutes. So if you have any questions, you should be able to see a small hand icon on your dashboard. So if you have any questions, you can click on that hand icon and you can then unmute you. Okay, so we have a question from Just a second. Okay, so we have a question from Karim Aslan. Okay, so I'm unmuting you. Yeah, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Hello, can you hear us, Karim Aslan? Sorry, we can't hear you for some reason. So please type in your question in the Q&A box. Okay, so we'll move on to other hands. Let's see. Okay. Hi, Ha. Can you hear us?
Yes, Nia. Yeah, thank you. And actually, I typed my question to the Q&A box already, but I can write here if you want. I have four questions actually. First is about the default value for the wood fuel requirement for the default value. In the rule that the default value is 0.4 kilogram wood for treatment of 1 liter of water. But this doesn't refer to what type of baseline stove in that. In case improved cook stove, then this would be different to the 3-stone fire stove. So please clarify which type of technology in the baseline can be applied that default value. And the second question is that in the rule for the new water methodology, it's required VPA to apply the new methodology when it's submit for renewal second vetting period, but whether the POA need to be under design change of the methodology as well, together with the VPA, because the gold standard for global goal requirement, which is like the root, the rule for it's higher level than the rule clarification requires the math methodology in the VPA must be the same as the POA. So if the project developer only apply the new methodology in the VPA but not make a design change in the POA, then this will not following the gold standard for global goal requirement. My third question is about the transition of the CDM CPI. Please clarify the valid registration status for the case that the CPI is first grading period is just end before submitting to gold standard, because I understand the case from the project developer that it make no sense for them to renew the second grading period and at the same time submitting to gold standard because they don't want to apply the CDM grading period anymore. But they still need to apply for the second grading period so that they can like retain their valid registration status. And my last question is regarding the case that if a CDM project registered in January 2016 and in its transition to gold standard in June 2022, it means 6.5 years from the grading period of CDM. So will that project need to be renewed in end of 2020, 2022, sorry, in the next 5 years? Yeah, that's all of my question. Thanks.
Thanks, Ha. So maybe I will, start with your last question. So for a project, for a CDM project which has a crediting period start date from 2016 and is transitioning to gold standard. So for that project, since it will be going through, a fresh, preliminary review, validation, design review. So it will be, considered, first as a registration. But yes, for the second, crediting period, it will be considered from the date when the crediting period in CDM started. So if the crediting period started under CDM in 2016, so the first crediting period, basically will be till till 2022, and then it has to be renewed. So I know it probably might not make sense for a project to register and then immediately apply for a crediting period renewal. But yes, I think in such a case, we could look at these crediting cycles and the next steps as part of the preliminary review itself, and see at what point the crediting period has to be renewed for such a project. Okay. So moving to your first question, maybe then on the default values. Yeah, I know it's not pretty clear as to what is the baseline, but I think that the baseline that we usually consider is a 3-stone fire or
Jadi snow stove.
Sorry.
Jadi snow stove, you mean?
Sorry, I can't hear you that well. Hello. Okay, so sorry, I can't hear you that well, but I see that you have also typed your questions in the Q&A box also. So we'll get we'll have a read at that. We'll have a read at those questions and respond to you. Okay, so I can see a lot of questions. I think there are there are over 50 questions. So Martha, is there any specific question which you would like to take from the Q&A box? I can't see any more raised hands.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Neka. I have tried to answer the questions that I could answer offhand, and I think the rest of the questions also with view of on time, we could simply reply in writing and publish the answers and send them to the attendees. Is that something we can do?
Yeah, sure, Martha. So everyone, since we have a lot of questions in the Q&A box, I think it will be easier if we can respond on these questions to you separately after the webinar. So what we have been doing recently is that we prepare a report on Q&A. So we take all the questions from this Q&A box, we prepare responses, and we share this document with all the participants after the webinar. It takes time. It usually takes us a week to do that, but this is something which we aim to do as soon as possible after each webinar. So I think that's what we'll do for this one as well. So we'll prepare maybe a document with the questions and the responses, and we'll share it with all the attendees. But in the meantime, if there is any burning question on which you need an immediate response, you can send us an email, and we'll respond immediately. Okay, I hope that works for everyone. All right, so with that, I think we can close the webinar now. We'll put up a recording of this on the Gold Standard YouTube channel soon, maybe by early next week. And we'll also share with you this document on all the questions and the responses as soon as possible. Any closing remarks from your side, Martha?
No, just thank you for the very elaborate webinar today, and thank you everyone for participating and for staying so long with us. As always, we're available for any questions on the usual channels, and we thank you again for working with the Gold Standard and Sustain Cert, and wish you a wonderful afternoon, evening.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and have a good day ahead. Thank you, bye-bye. Bye.